We ready to jump into this video? You've been
Yes.
talking way too long. All right, guys, we're
Yep.
going to check out this Peterson Murray interview. Super dope, super based, awesome stuff. We could even cover this in a couple live streams to make sure we get through all of it because it's dope.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jordan.
I'm talking today to Douglas Murray, who just wrote this book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the future of civilization. That's
I have
this.
the same thing.
We basically walk through the book chapter.
So you're basically Jordan Peterson. Hey, AP, we can use the same reasoning that Muslims use to show that Jesus was a Muslim. They say, look, Jesus bowed down and prayed. Muslims bow down and pray. Therefore, Jesus was a Muslim. Now, that's a specific, it's called the fallacy of the undistributed middle. But following that exact same reasoning, Jordan Peterson has Douglas Murray's book. AP has Douglas Murray's book. Therefore, AP is Jordan Peterson.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, guys, everyone understand how stupid that reasoning is? It's one of the main arguments of Dawa, guys. That level of stupidity.
I am Jordan Peterson.
That's the proof, and that's why AP has to. That's why Jordan has to wear this wig to cover up that he is, in fact, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
See, you can tell by the voice. You got to look. You got to listen to the voice, not look in the eyes.
Yeah.
Chapter by chapter. It's a relatively short book, although it doesn't lack in intensity. What happened October 7th when Hamas invaded Israel? What I saw, Douglas's account of his sojourn through Israel in the aftermath of the catastrophe, how the world turned. We discussed the protests primarily originating on university campuses, much to their eternal shame. The disconnect, the fact that the propaganda exercise and what would you say, the zeitgeist of the West was such so that Israel was demonized almost immediately after the attack for daring to defend itself. And then Douglas's conclusion, from defeat into victory. And
by the way, wasn't that crazy? That's still crazy, like to this day. Like, it seemed like what? Like maybe 1 to 2 days where most people were like on Israel's side, and then right after the first 1 to 2 days, it was already like blasting away at Israel.
Yeah, it was insane. And the thing is that Jordan Peterson's audience also very much turned the other way and turned like anti-Israel and all that. And to be honest, this makes me kind of respect Jordan Peterson. There were many cases where I kind of called him out, where especially you talked a lot of trash about him. But the whole Israel thing happened, and he has been insisting from the very beginning until now, continuously, that Israel is in the right here, despite this taking a very, very big toll on his viewership and all that. You look at his channel after October 7th, after the twist, his viewership dropped massively and his popularity dropped massively among the right. Because there has been a new trend among the right of becoming anti-Israel. But he has been insistingly resisting that and insistingly saying that Israel is in the right, which is pretty based.
Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Well, that's where the conversation got a little bit more theological, possibly, an inevitability when talking about the existence of good and evil. We discussed Douglas's observations that the Israelis have been very successful at pushing forward a truly pro-life, pro-abundance ethos, and the consequence for their thriving, for their resilience in the face of really insuperable opposition, and the meaning of that for hope, not only in Israel, but in the West in general, and a hope we most desperately need in these strangest of all times.
I have to say, especially UK, when I post videos, and I'll be like I did. Matter of fact, I posted a video this morning about this Candid with Libna situation, explained how it's becoming Pakistan. People in the UK sound pretty hopeless right now. Like, we're done, and we have no idea what to do. And just imagine that situation. You see your country like turning into Pakistan all around you, and you're completely powerless because if you do anything, the government comes after you. That's anyway. I agree. Hope is needed. Hope is very important right now.
Join us for that. So, Mr. Murray, I read your book. on democracies and death cults, Israel and the Future of Civilization. Yeah, it's a pretty rough read in like 5 different dimensions. It's brutal and unnerving and like terribly relevant, and not merely
Why does he look so red
because of the
nowadays?
situation in
What'd you say?
Why does he look so red nowadays?
Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
I mean, that could be my editing software in theory, because I always click color correct and it could have corrected on something else. So, in other words, he may be way whiter than this. We don't know.
Israel. So I think what we should do first
You could look on the original and see if he is this.
No.
is I'm going to ask you questions about each chapter. It's a short book. There's 5 chapters. It starts with what happened. And there's questions everyone has. How did the Israeli security forces miss this? How could something like this happen? What did happen? Who was responsible? So let's start by laying that out. What happened on October 7th?
Yeah, guys. So Jordan, I mean, he's asking what happened and stuff, but there was embedded in there an important issue, namely, why did the security forces fail? How did this even happen? And that's been an important objection ever since, that has led to all kinds of conspiracy theories, as in there's no way Israel could have been this open to an attack unless it was deliberate. In other words, they deliberately held everyone back and let this attack happen because they wanted to. That's the conspiracy theory. So Jordan's asking about that.
What happened was that about 4,000 or more terrorists invaded Israel in the early morning. The Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other jihadist groups in Gaza started firing hundreds and hundreds of rockets at about 6:30 in the morning, almost exactly 6:30 in the morning. So air raid sirens went off across the country. But then something, and sadly, that's kind of usual in Israel. It's quite common to have air raid sirens, particularly in the south, has been for 20 years.
Yeah.
What became clear was very unusual was that across multiple parts of the Gaza-Israel border, thousands of terrorists broke in. They broke down the fences, they went to the checkpoints where Gazan workers would come through each day and where aid lorries and indeed commerce occurred. They went to those crossings as well.
Hey, AP, that's already an important point, that it starts off with the warnings about the rockets firing. But they're so used to that it's not even a big deal anymore, right?
Yeah. I heard the same thing talking to many Israelis, including people who were there. We talked to somebody as well, somebody who was there at the party where nearly 400 people were killed. Where many of the people who survived that attack said that at first they started hearing sirens, warnings. And many of them looked up and looked around, and some initially ignored it, or just thought, "Okay, let's get ready. Let's go for one of the shelters around." That's it. Because Israel lives like that the entire time for years. This is how Israel is. Israel was being constantly attacked, constantly under rocket fire. In the past, it was much worse. There were bombs. There were all kinds of different mass shootings. Israel solved that problem by building a wall to the West Bank and shut off the terrorism from there, and also separating completely from Gaza and building a huge gap between Gaza. After which, the situation turned more into just missiles every now and then that are fired, upon which you hear sirens and everyone seeks shelter. That's it. So Israelis are very, very much used to it, that you just get missiles fired at you. And the funny thing is, nowadays, there are lots of people who say, when you bring this up, say, "Oh, but what about Gaza? They're being bombed all the time." Well, they're being bombed right now because there is war. Prior to this, Israel was getting missiles fired at them all the time for years when there was no war, because this is how they have somehow agreed to live, with neighbors that are constantly engaged in terrorist activities, that don't want to have peace, that don't want to have diplomatic relations, that always insisted on simply fighting and firing rockets aimlessly. So that morning, people were expecting, oh, okay, this is another rocket fire, rocket alert. It's going to be over soon. Probably nothing's going to happen. But then things got really, really bad.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's like a kind of a boy who cried wolf situation. It's more serious than the boy crying wolf because the rocket attacks are actually dangerous, but you have such confidence in your security system, the Iron Dome and so on, to take out these rockets that you think, very, 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 very tiny chance that anything's actually going to happen to me. We're totally used to this. So they hear the sirens all the time, which is, hey, there's an attack going on. And then on this day, October 7th, they hear the sirens going off because of the rockets being fired and so on. And what do you think? You think I'm not in much danger. Everyone thinks, pretty normal situation here. So you look around. Hey, do I see any rockets? Nah. So I'm probably okay. And as Douglas is pointing out, this time was different. They had thousands of people pouring through checkpoints, going on hang gliders, and so on. So different situation. People weren't expecting or ready for this.
Attacked the soldiers, overwhelmed them in quite a lot of places. It was a religious holiday. It's the holiday of Simchat Torah, and so a lot of people were at home with their families. It was 50 years to the day since the Yom Kippur War, when Israel's Arab neighbors invaded in a surprise attack as well. So you might say, well, how come it's a surprise? That was one of the things, as soon as I got to Israel straight after the 7th, one of the things I was trying to find out was what the hell went wrong. Because the Israelis have always had, certainly since 1973, a sort of invulnerability. It's not true, of course, but they were seen to be invulnerable by many of their neighbors. Certainly
Impossible to catch by surprise.
Impossible to catch by surprise. It's what I call the Fowlerization of Israel, the sort of idea that it's eyes in the sky everywhere, nothing that can be done that could surprise them.
And I got that impression when I was there in whatever it was, 2018, 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. Anyway, I was there back then. And the guy who designed their fence system actually was showing us the fence system and so on. But this was for Jerusalem. This is for Jerusalem. It wasn't for like all Israel or the area between like Gaza and various kibbutzes and so on. But the fence for Israel, the fence around Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and the West Bank, it's this double fence system. And anything basically touches one fence, then security would be on it before you even got to the next fence. Security would be ready. They'd be ready to take you out very quickly. You go down to Gaza and so on. It's different. It's a different situation. You got a fence running down between it. And you have various checkpoints and so on. But they just weren't ready for thousands of people all storming the border that quickly. But yeah, anyway, if you had asked me after seeing their defense, just the fencing system and so on, some places you have walls and so on. If you had said, hey, what are the odds that like Gaza, some jihadis are going to get past this? But pretty darn slim. They were even explaining like like they're anticipating different ways that guys could circumvent this security. So one of their concerns is flying drones over the place. So he said that one of the security features that they're working on was a system where anytime a drone flies over that fence, a signal goes, reprograms the drone, and sends it right back to wherever it took off from. In other words, if you're trying to blow them up by sending a bomb across, it's going to send it right back at you. As soon as you go over top of the fence, it's going to send it right back and blow you up. So anyway, stuff like that. So I would have thought, no, there's no way this attack like this is going to succeed. And guess what? Lots of other people would have thought the same thing. No way this attack like this is going to succeed. What's that mean? It means you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case. Massive amounts of the security apparatus of Israel failed. Hamas were also very, very clever. They'd done a lot of reconnaissance using, sadly, Gazan workers in Israel to do the reconnaissance, it has to be said, in the months and years ahead of the 7th. They knew how to take down things like communications. They knew how to take down the security apparatus at the border. And by the time that hundreds and then thousands of people were flooding into Israel, invading, they were going community by community through the south, village by village. They're called kibbutz. They're small communities of sometimes a few hundred, sometimes 1,000 people. And these were peaceful communities, farming communities. And they started to go house by house through these communities, massacring the people inside.
AP,
Yes.
you've covered this many times before, but for any new people here, tell us about the people in these communities. Were these hardcore anti-Palestinian people in these various communities?
On the contrary, the people living in the kibbutzim, which is a very successful system of little town communities in Israel, that were set up in order to so Israel, most of the land there was totally empty, and what the Israelis did in resettling the land was to build small communities where that are completely built on mutual trust and togetherness. They're basically like little compounds. They have a fence system. They have homes where everyone knows each other. Everyone who lives there is in contact with each other. They all have chat groups and visit each other on a regular basis and so on. But the thing is, many of these people are people who live on the outskirts of Gaza or close to the so-called Palestinian territories. And many of these people also happen to be often secular people and often very leftist and often very environmentalist and also pro-peace and pro-Palestine people.
But basically, what we would call hippies. These are hippie communes.
I would be more. I mean, the hippies are very dysfunctional people. Well, these
I don't
people
mean
are
in
like
the dysfunctional sense. I mean in the if you go back, a lot of them had the idea. Hey, just it sounds like something hippies would do, right? Let's start a community.
Yeah.
Let's start a community where we grow our own stuff and we all live together and we sing songs together and we just live in peace with everyone in the world and so on.
It's basically socialism, but it works because it's made for a small community, not for the entire nation. The entire nation is not meant to be that way. It is a small community that is in perfect harmony with each other and where everything works because it's a tiny community that is just completely built on everyone shares everything and everyone works together. We are all one small family that lives here and maintains this community. So that was the entire purpose there. And these were very often extremely hardworking, wonderful people, but many of these people were also dedicate much of their lives to helping the Palestinians. For example, many of the kibbutzim that were attacked, they had volunteers. They had people who would on a regular basis, drive over to the border of Gaza and get all kinds of demands from the Gazans, and then go back to buy them a bunch of stuff, take their kids and take them to hospitals, pay for all their needs, speak to the governments and advocate for their rights and so on. So these were the people who were on the front of fighting for the Gazans and their well-being and their caretaking and so on. And what happened to these people?
They got massacred.
Yes.
And
Hamas did not care. Gazans did not care. They were the first to be brutally murdered in their homes.
So, does it matter which side you're on ideologically? Just matters what side you're on of the fence. If you're on that side of the fence. Matter of fact, we heard that it didn't even matter if you're You didn't even have to be Jewish. You could be, matter of fact, you could be Muslim. They were still coming to kill you.
Yeah.
They didn't care. You're on that side of the fence. You got to die. Interesting. And then what did we hear a lot after the October 7th attack? We'll just take down the fence and everyone live together. Brilliant.
Lots of those
Brilliant
people
strategy.
had to move away. Lots of those people had to be evacuated, and they don't live there anymore. Many people wanted to go back by all means, so many of them have been brought back again to live there. There's a constant resettling and so on. But many of those people who were so much pro-peace, pro-Palestine, and so on, after October 7, had to face reality and turned around, and are no longer like that. So yeah.